Hello, welcome to the first episode of RPG Race of the Week. This week we're going to be covering Dwarves, the almighty Dwarves of the high misty mountains and the deep, deep roads. Dwarves have been one of my favorite races that I've always been running and playing with ever since I started playing D&D a long time ago. Probably not as long as some other guys on YouTube, but for the longest of time. Dwarves as a race always have these stereotypes about them. Like, one of my favorites is always having the big, long, lengthy beard, or always wielding an axe, or having the warhammer of smiting. Dwarves have always been hardy, shorter folk. They've been wide. You know, they've always tended had these stereotypes of living in clans, or living in mountainsides, or living deep underground, or living in so on and so forth. I'm just going to go over mainly the stereotypes and the racial traits and everything that's in here. But do keep in mind, you can always take any race or any culture in your game, take it and warp it and change it to any way you want. Do you want your dwarves to, instead of live in Rocky Mountains, to live instead of in the forest like the Arbor Dwarves that Tetsubo 57 came up with, which I thought were really cool, but I'm personally not going to use? Or do you want them live more like humans in like giant cities that are more like giant strongholds that live together? But we'll go into that more later. There are standard racial traits. They have +2 Constitution, +2 Wisdom, and -2 Charisma. Dwarves are hardy folk. They tend to be wise because of their age, but they're not that great to look at. You know, the men have beards, the women have beards, and the children also have beards. They're medium size, so they're same. They have no penalties or changes based on their size. They are slow and steady, and very stable. So dwarves move very slowly. They only have a base speed of 4 squares or 20 feet. They have dark vision, which is understandable because they generally live underground or in mountain caves. Defensive training. Dwarves always had this thing as their culture, against giants and orcs and sometimes elves. So depending on your dwarf, you might have certain racial trainings against those monsters. Greed. This is an interesting one. I don't want to spoil it, but in The Hobbit you'll see what I mean about this. Dwarves gain a +2 racial bonus for making a price stakes to determine the price of non-magical goods, of metals and gemstones. Some dwarves love their gold. Some dwarves really like gold. Some dwarves will cut off 3 arms to get a hold of it, but again, some dwarves won't. Let's see. Sorry, I'm studying a bit today, guys. I have not been able to speak well. As I said, they also have stability, which they gain a +4 combat maneuver bonus against bull rush or trip attempts. Dwarves, in general, think of a short guy who's really, really stable and hard to move, like it's trying to move a boulder. And not only are they like that physically, they're very much like that socially. They're very stubborn people. Like if you ever read Dragonlance, Flint, the dwarf, absolutely refuses to ever go on a boat or a ship or across water of any kind, because he absolutely hates and despises it. And trying to get a dwarf to do something that he does not want to do, you have a better luck of shifting a mountain sometimes. But dwarves are also naturally good or naturally trained in stone cutting or metal forging, which is just true of their culture. Just like the elves are always associated with their woodworking or their bow making and etc. Dwarves are all about stone, steel, metal, adamantine, and all that fun stuff. Dwarven society is normally made up of clans. You live in a family of generally of all your extended people, and depending on your dungeon master or how you want to run dwarves, I personally run my dwarves where they have this odd gender imbalance, where for every 1 female dwarf, there are 3 males. Now, the reasoning for this is that they have clan mothers, so they're a matriarchal society. So all the family traditions and family lands goes down on the female side. This might sound really odd, but it works fairly well culturally in my game, because I've always seen dwarves, like whenever I played them with my old people I used to play with, there's always male dwarves, and you never see female dwarves or anything like that. But, well, that's me. Let's see. I'm missing something. What am I forgetting? Hopefully I can edit this out. Oh, relations. Dwarves generally don't like elves or halflings or gnomes because they consider them frail or pretty or pampered or, etc. They're hardy and tough. They don't really like half-orcs or orcs because, well, orcs and dwarves generally live in the same type of biome, the mountainous regions or in some cases underground, and they've been fighting over these places for millennia. Sorry about that cut in the video, guys. My camera memory stick just got full. I believe I was on the dwarven relations. Dwarves and orcs and half-orcs don't really get along because, again, they're fighting over the same biome or the same living spaces, so they've been fighting for millennia, or at least long enough in my game. They can also argue that they fight with the goblins in the same way like this. For the dwarven alignment or religion, dwarves tend to be more lawful because they're very traditional people, and they tend to be stereotyped as standoffish, and they always have a strong sense of friendship and loyalty and honor and valor and all that fun stuff, And they also tend to be more good or neutral instead of chaotic or evil. There are evil dwarves, but if they're evil, they're more like lawful evil. Like if you ever played Dragon Age, the Carta, which is like the dwarven mafia. They're lawful evil, not chaotic evil. I'm sure you could make a chaotic evil dwarf, it just won't really match well. For adventurers, dwarves are less likely to be, or less dwarven adventurers than there are human adventurers because they generally are born into a clan, they're born into a job, they work that job and that's what they do. But in some cases, they might go like, I wonder what's out in the world. Let's go out and find out. Or let's go out and reclaim dwarven cities, or old dwarven lost cities, or old dwarven relics or artifacts, or things like that. Because the dwarves, if they don't believe it is broken, they don't fix it, and if it is broken, they'll fix it before they replace it. So if a dwarf adventurer hears, there's an ancient dwarven artifact in there, they'll most likely go out and try and get it, but it depends on the character and what they want to do. Now, I'm going to start going over the really interesting part of the Advanced Race Guide. It's the alternate racial rules. Now, if you look in your core book, I'm blanking on the page, but I believe it's chapter 2, races. You get all these little things right here, which are your racial abilities. If you want, you can mix and match your alternate racial rules with these ones. So, let's see. Let's say you wanted to take Ancient Enmity, or Enmity, Enemy, I can't pronounce it today. And dwarves have long been in conflict with elves, especially the hated drow. If you don't know drow, they're dark elves that live underneath the, in the Underdark, which is deep underground. Dwarves with this racial ability gain +1 racial attack rolls against humanoid creatures of the elf such. This replaces hatred. So, if your dwarf despises elves more than he despises giants or orcs, you can switch the trainings and have a bonus against elves instead of orcs. So if you were like a dwarf ranger, and instead of wanting to hunt giants, you hunted drow, that works pretty well. Or there are many others, because there's literally a solid page and a fourth in here. One of the more interesting ones was magic resistant, where basically you gain spell resistance of 5 plus your character level. So some dwarves, just like the dwarves in Dragon Age, you'll hear me referencing Dragon Age a lot because it's one of my favorite games. In Dragon Age, dwarves can't do like mage magic, but they can make enchantments. This kind of plays it up a bit because it's like, oh, you're trying to hit me with a spell? Huh, that's funny. The problem with this, though, is that it's a full standard action to lower spell resistance, so if you wanted to get healing from something or drink a potion, you have to lower it. But hey, that's what you get for having magic resistance. There are many in here, and I'm going to cover as many as I can, but if I go over all of them, it's going to take me like 30 minutes. If you want me to go over all of them, say so in the comments. But here's one I think that's really awesome. It's called Stubborn. This replaces Hardy. Basically, your dwarf is so stubborn, you can resist magical charm effects, and you gain a bonus to will saves against enchantment or compulsion effects or seduction, which I think is really awesome. So if your dwarf is just like, I ain't moving and I ain't going nowhere, it doesn't matter how high that charisma is on that barmaid, she is not getting you to drink. But dwarves are most likely to drink, but that's a bad example. Most dwarves live underground, or live in mountains, which is understandable. But here's another one. It's surface survivalist. So maybe your dwarf, in his training or out his years or where he was born, he goes up to the surface all the time and interacts with the surface folk, you know. And there's a really funny joke that there's some dwarves that are born underground, and they're so used to having the ceiling above them, right? When they leave their underground cities and they see the sky, they'll think they'll fall up into the sky because there's no ceiling to stop them. Which is another joke from Dragon Age, which I think is hilarious. But, you know, there's a lot of things you can do. So if you really wanted to, and your dungeon master allows it, which I think he/she should, or depending on the game, I can't say that entirely, but I let people do this. If it makes sense for the character to switch out your racial traits, and it isn't just for a power gaming reason, I really dislike it when a player walks up and says, I want to do this! I say, okay, why? And they say it's basically for a power gaming reason. Is you're going to say, no, I know that's a bit harsh, but you should have a solid character reason why. It is a role-playing game, not a role game. Well, it is a role game. Role as in R-O-L-L. You know, it's not Munchkin. It's Pathfinder or Dungeons and Dragons. Sorry again about the cut in the video. My camera's really hating me today, and it's just something with the memory card. I gotta fix it somehow. But anyway, as I was saying, try not to power game these things because it's bad for the hobby. Please don't power game people. Okay, I know there are many opinions on this, and it isn't the video to talk about this, so I'm going to get back to this now. Now, what's cool about this is that, as I said, you can mix and match and customize it yourself, but the book does provide 4 racial subtypes that already have stuff changed out for you. You know? So there's like the Deep Delver, which is basically a dwarf that goes deep underground and just delves down there and does all that. And they gave you a little snippet about it. Or the Elder Dwarf, which are dwarves that are basically among ancient clans who have always been this way, and they've lived this way for eons, and they will continue living this way for eons, because that's how they are, because they're stubborn and they're how they are. Then there's the Exiled Dwarf, you know, dwarves who have lost their homelands, or dwarves that were exiled themselves. You know, they're basically wanderers type to a degree. Or they could be trying to find a new place. Then you have the Mountain Dwarf, you know, dwarves that live on high mountain peaks, and they have the ooh, that's interesting. I missed one. But for one of the alternate racial traits, something is called xenophobic. Now, xenophobic is essentially afraid of the other or change. They're isolationists, you know, which is cool. I can clearly see some dwarven clans saying, no, they're foreign, keep them away. A lot like the Japanese, to a degree, where they're very isolationist and they don't like foreign cultures influencing theirs, even though their culture influences a lot of ours. Look at manga, anime, or all that jazz. But, yeah, that's cool. Then after you get past all the racial subtraits and racial subtypes, you get into the favored class options. Now, they give you, basically, if you play a certain race, and that race leans towards that class, you'll get little bonuses to it. In this book, they give you bonuses for basically every class. But clearly, some classes are better than others. You know, what's the classic dwarf? It's the dwarf fighter, the dwarf cleric, or the dwarf inquisitor, I guess in this case. I don't personally like inquisitors. And they also have a new one down here. They have one for my favorite class, the wizard. You know, and let's just look at the cleric. Basically, the cleric favorite class option is that you gain more uses of your domain power of your choosing. And for the wizard, you craft things faster, which is interesting. So the way that favored classes work is that, let's say you're a dwarf, and you want to play a cleric. Because you are a dwarf cleric, you gain these abilities because of your race. But if let's say an elf was playing a cleric, may not get the same bonuses because they're not a dwarf. You know, it's really straightforward, and I'm rambling, and I'm going to move on. After the favored class options, there are the racial archetypes. You know, like we all know what. Who's texting me? Sorry, guys. It's James. Okay. James Page, my good friend James from Troop 1, is now an Eagle Scout. So hooray for him. That's very good. I'm gonna get back to him. Hopefully I can get my Eagle project done in the next couple... Oh, wait, no, I'm on a tangent. Coming back to it, in the racial archetypes, they basically give you an example class, and basically, you know how, like, I'm going to use the wizard, for example, because I know that class best. As you level up through the wizards, as you gain levels, you gain certain bonuses or things, right? Like a wizard gains a bonus feat every 5 levels, and you gain little things, like a fighter gains a combat feat every even level. And here, with these racial archetypes, right here, they basically give you a class, like this is the X-Arch, which is an Inquisitor archetype, and they give you a new build, and new abilities that you'll gain because you do it. One that I really liked was the Foe Hammer. Oh! You know, dwarves have 2 main weapons that they're generally stereotyped with. The big giant axe and the big giant warhammer. And this one just really plays up your ability to use warhammers. And they have really interesting things, like at level 9 you gain rhythmic blows. As you hit something, you gain bonuses for hitting that something. Because it's just like, I don't know if you ever seen Blacksmith Force things, it becomes a rhythm for hitting, kind of like a drummer. So you hit and hit and hit and hit and hit. Something I think that would be interesting as a cross-class thing is that if you play a Foe Hammer fighter with rhythmic blows, and you take a few levels of Bard, so you're creating the music while you're bashing your enemy's head in while you're singing. I think that'd be interesting for flavor. I'm not sure if it'll work out mechanically, but as a character, that sounds cool. You know, I'm gonna make an NPC like that now. I like that. I like that a lot. And after the Foe Hammer one, the next one is the Forge Master Cleric. As the stereotype goes, dwarves love crafting, especially metals and stone. If it's dwarven steel or dwarven metal or whatever the dwarves use in your game, whether it be adamantine or silverite or mithril, mithril's more of an elf thing, or whatever, this one, which is a cleric, which is oddly enough, I thought, you know, it'd be something else. There's no artificer class, or at least one I've found yet, where they gain basically these divine spells that help them craft items. So if you're in the type of game that really allows for crafting and really encourages it, you can play one of these and make really cool items. Like, something they can do is a Rune Forger. Which, in other words, they could craft these runes and place them on the items that give them certain effects, kind of like magical effects. So, maybe your dwarf cleric is so good at making this one type of weapon, the weapons become magical. I believe there's a feat for it called Master Craftsman, where you're so unbelievably good at crafting these items, or you've learned over time, over trial and error, you've learned how to make them magical without being a caster yourself. Which is cool. But in this case, you are a caster because you're a cleric. But, basically, like, if you want to, you can mix and match your runes to a degree, I believe. I haven't fully read into this, but I really want to now. Because I haven't played a character in a long time. I've been GMing a lot, which I like to do a lot, but if any of my players want to run a game, you know, for like a session or two, I'd love just to come and play a bit, you know. Then after the Forge Master Cleric, you have the Stone Lord Paladin. As I said earlier, dwarves tend to lean to being lawful and good. And what's the Quizidential Paladin? Lawful good. Or as my good friend Matt Doss calls it, lawful anal. Paladins, just in my opinion, I know they're cool. People love to play them. I don't like to. Because Paladins, in some cases, are required to be lawful good. I'm neutral good in real life. When I play these games, it's kind of like stepping into new shoes or playing or escaping or doing that. I don't want to play a clone of myself. I want to play something random. Like if I were to make a crazy sorcerer who's chaotic neutral or something like that. Because I don't want to play a retro clone of myself or a retro clone of something else. You know? Some people really like it, like the Dawnforge cast. Andrew, I believe his name is, like, he started doing these race videos and really inspired me to doing them. I'm not trying to steal his thunder or anything. If I find a link to his videos, I'll link him to them because I think they're great. And also his Paladin videos, because if you want to learn how to play a Paladin, right, learn from him, because he does well. If you want to learn how to play a Wizard, that's me. But basically, since as Stone Lord Paladin, they gain these Earth channeling abilities in Stone Servant. Stone Servant. Oh, you gain an Earth Elemental, basic, or you calls her, or nothing else to your side as a Paladin calls her mount, which is interesting. So apparently, as a Stone Lord Paladin, instead of summoning a mount, you can summon a little Earth Elemental. Whether that's used in combat or just for mounting, I don't know, but I'm sure it could be, because no one in my game has run this yet. I'm sure you could take any of these archetypes and bend them and change them, or just take the idea of them and really make an interesting and fun character to play, you know. But there are little things in here I can clearly see already that are clearly mechanically based, where if you change him just in that little way, it's like Jenga. If you pull the wrong block, it all falls down. You got to be careful. After this, they have the Dwarven equipment, you know. So they basically give you new weapons and armor, like the Dwarven helmet boulder. This is one of the first times I've actually seen a helmet as armor. Because you look at the core book, they don't list helmets. They list shields, full plate, excuse me, and weapons. They don't really list or do things with helmets, you know, which we should have something for helmets, but it's a complex thing and we're not sure how we're going to implement it. Here they have the Dwarven Boulder Helmet. This heavy reinforced helmet can be used to make melee attacks. Hey, want to play a dwarf to smash his head into things? Here you go. The wearer may also use the helmet when attempting bull rush maneuvers, gaining a +2 you gain bonuses. Ooh, 20% arcane failure chance. Crafted from unusual materials. So you want a helmet made entirely out of stone rock and have your dwarf run his head into things? Here you go. It's a D4. But I'm pretty sure you can argue a larger hit die, because if let's say a 180-pound dwarf charging at full speed with a solid stone helmet slams into your gut, even if you're wearing a breastplate or chainmail, I'm pretty sure your ribs were just broken or shattered, and you probably have a few punctured lungs and things. After that, they have the long axe, which basically it's just an axe with a long shaft used for attacking giants and other things. The long hammer, which functions like the long axe, and the war axe or dwarven devil, which functions a lot like the orcish double axe, which makes sense. It appears just to be the dwarven double axe appears to work a lot like the orcish double axe, which is interesting. It's a 2d6 weapon, so yay, ×3 crit, weighs 20 pounds, and wait, no, I was looking at the long hammer. Sorry. It's a D10 weapon ×3, 20 pounds, and it has a reach of adjacent, not what's the term? Yeah, adjacent to. After that, they have the dwarven feats, which are interesting. Like dwarves love alcohol in general. Generally, they love alcohol. Look at Gimli. Drinking and drinking and drinking in the Lord of the Rings. Or look at the group of dwarves in The Hobbit. Ironically, the first feat on the list is Brewmaster. Basically, you become a brewer. You make your own alcohol, make your own beer, make your own ale or wine or whatever you have your dwarves drink. Generally, I have them drink really strong ale or whiskey in my games. And then after that, they have many other ones, like, let's take a look at Cleave Through. So you're playing a dwarf fighter with this big giant axe, and you take the cleave list, because you just meant to cleave through people. This is a combat feat. While using Cleave or Great Cleave, if your initial attack hits, you can take a single 5-foot step as if a free action when making your additional attacks. So, I cleave to the orc head, then I shift a square, then I cleave to the next orc head, then I shift a square, then I cleave to the next orc head, and it continues, which would be really cool, and I like it. You know, I'm sure this could be used in many ways. Orc Hewer. Again, if in your backstory, your dwarf really hates orcs, here's an actual combat feat granting you bonuses to slaying orcs. If you haven't noticed yet, I despise orcs. Yeah. I'm pretty sure if you were to pick me up and throw me into a fantasy setting, I'd either pop up as a dwarf or a halfling. Probably more like a dwarf. But, yeah. Toxic recovery. Dwarves already have a natural resistance to poison. Or at least I believe they still have a natural resistance to poison. I might be wrong. Do not quote me on that. Yes, they do. They still are hardy. If you want to increase your hardiness, there's a feat for it for toxic recovery. So in the advent of your dwarf actually being poisoned, because you know those drow and their poisons, you can recover from it quicker. Then they have the almighty small section on dwarven magic items, which are great and all, like an elixir of dark sight. Oh, so dwarves already have dark vision. So when I first read this, I thought it was, okay, they have dark vision, why they need an elixir of dark sight? Essentially, if you have a magical darkness or deeper darkness spell where you can't actually see through it with dark vision, you can drink this potion and be able to see through it. You know, which is interesting. And in some games, like I run a high magic setting, where I run a high magic setting where there are mages in a lot of places, and you can find a lot of magic things, and you know it's around. And some games, magic is hard to find, and just like in the 20 questions video, some people allow you only to buy consumables like potions and scrolls. So items like this are useful because it's sometimes hard to find just potions in these books. The Rod of Dwarven Might, the Groundswell, the Iron Beard, the Toilsome Chant. You know, more examples of items, which are great. Actually, no, those are spells. After the items, they have the Dwarven spells, where the way that the racial spells work, I'd imagine that only that race can cast them. But I could be wrong. I'd imagine that only if... let's take a look at Ironbeard, which is a transmutation skill, which is an anti-paladin 1, cleric 1, magus 1, paladin 1, or ranger 1. Wonder why, if it's a magus 1, why it isn't a wizard 1. Basically, it causes your spear to become stiff as iron and erupt from your face on a willing target. It gains a +1 armor bonus to AC, and it can stack with other things. So in other words, the spellcaster casts on his beard and goes, "Hoonk!" You know, because it's a dwarven racial spell. If an elf were to cast Ironbeard, it's a dwarven spell. What's the elf skin going to do? Instantaneously sprout beard and do it? Because we all know the elves and their pretty little clean-shaved faces. And hopefully that is the last time my camera malfunctions tonight. Because I believe I was just talking about elves, whether my camera just instantaneously decided to turn itself off. If anyone knows where I can find a cheap and reliable camera, I'd be greatly appreciative. But anyway, that covers everything in this section of the Advanced Race Guide about dwarves. Keep in mind though, this is just all the stereotypes of dwarves that I've been talking about. You can always take your dwarves in your game and take them and twist them and move them and shape them in any way that you want. Or potentially, if you're a player, you can take the certain dwarves that you are and change them a little bit and see if your DM will help you make it, because, you know, let your players have input on the story and the world itself, because then it's, you know, more like a sandbox than like a railroad, or more like a story-driven game. But that's an entirely separate concept, and we'll talk about that later if we want to. But in the end, dwarves are one of my favorite races. I suggest that you play one sometime and see if you like them too. I'd love to see if anybody wants to make response videos to see what they've done with their dwarves, or if you want to leave comments below about how they changed dwarves or how they played dwarves, or interesting cases that they've seen dwarves do. And next week, we're going to be covering basically the race exactly opposite to the dwarves, the elves, and all the mini elves there are. But anyway, until then, I will see you next week.